Kia ora, I'm Erin J. Doyle. Welcome to my channel. This is going to be something of a reading wrap up for an unspecified period of time because I don't read fast enough to do monthly reading wrap ups. It would just be like, here's the one book I read and that would be it. So I have a stack of books that I've read over an amount of time. First up is The Dust of 100 Dogs. This is pretty good. I think I did pick this up because I saw reviews for it on BookTube, so I'm not going to go super in depth because the reality is you've probably already heard of it. But basically, a pirate some time ago is cursed at the moment of her death to live the lives of 100 dogs. The story begins with those 100 lives having been lived. We don't get to see her experiences of that. She has been born into a human body with all of her memories from her time as a pirate as well as all of her experiences as various dogs intact. So her family initially think that she's a genius because of her extensive historical knowledge. So she is living in a very poor family who have too many kids and are basically seeing her as the wonder child who will raise them out of poverty. But she's a pirate and she is just waiting until she is old enough to buy a plane ticket to go to, I want to say the Bahamas, where she has buried a massive thing of treasure and she just wants to pick up where she left off. So the story sort of follows her preparation from that, with her as a teenager going through the motions of finishing high school and trying to make everyone think that she's a normal girl who maybe is super good with history. And her goal is just to go and find her buried treasure. And her family are not too pleased about that. Eventually we get to see some flashbacks to her previous life. Mostly her previous life as a pirate. We do get to see a couple of brief moments from her experiences as a dog, or as dogs. So we get to see her as a young child and growing up and how she came to become a pirate. And we see a few things from her lives as dogs. I did think it was a little bit odd that her experiences as dogs specifically didn't seem to actually provide her with any important insight or skills as a human after having lived 100 lives as dogs. So I thought that was a little bit unexpected and a little bit strange, but it was pretty entertaining and I quite liked the ending. Next up we have Little Eyes. This is kind of hard to explain. To be honest, this is not my first attempt trying to explain it, so we'll see how we go this time. In this book, people can buy a little robot. It has wheels and a webcam, a microphone, etc. and it is operated by a complete stranger not of your choosing. And you just let it free in your house for some reason. So the stories in this book follow people who either own one of these little robots or who are operating one. The operators also don't get to choose whose robot they get assigned to. They buy a little access code, log on, and it just connects to a completely random one somewhere in the world. And once that connection is made, if it's ever severed, it's completely gone. The login never works again, they have to go buy a new one. Similarly, if the robot is damaged, that's it. It can't be reconnected, it's just thrown out. They're quite expensive, so there are some significant implications for that. Some of the stories are very brief, like one chapter and gone forever and we never get to see what happens next. Others run throughout the course of the entire book. Something I had expected was for the different stories, particularly the ones which lasted from the beginning of the book all the way to the end, to interact with each other. I thought maybe people that we knew from one area would meet, or, you know, something. I thought the two leads from these two stories would interact in some way, but no. The other thing that I expected when I first picked this up is that it would start off being quite a positive thing, and then kind of the climax of the book would come with people being perhaps blackmailed, or a young owner of one of these little robots being pressured to expose themselves on camera. That happened in the opening chapter, which left me kind of just shocked and bewildered as to what to expect next. So yeah, that was odd. What I didn't expect, and this is very spoilery, spoilers, is the fact that every single story has a bad ending. There's one storyline where someone who's operating a robot discovers a young girl who's been kidnapped and manages to alert the authorities. She gets rescued, and then, through the eyes of the little robot, discovers that her parents were actually implicit in her kidnapping, and the little girl is not safe, and then that's it. We don't get to see the user taking further actions to protect her. It's just like, oh well, she thinks she's safe now, the end. And that's kind of how all of the stories are. There are ones where you think, oh yes, this is going to happen, and then nope, actually the person who has, you know, developed a really strong relationship with the person who owns their little robot is going to be horribly humiliated. That's how that story is going to end. So it's really interesting, very entertaining, no happy endings. So if that's something that you're interested in, don't pick this one up. Next, I read The Book Thief. This took me so long to get through because not only is it quite thick, but for me it was a little bit put downable. Now I do begin to wonder if this is actually not because of the book, but because books set in Nazi Germany tend to take me ages. This is a realization I've only had whilst filming, so this is not a well-developed thought. But my thinking is that I know basically what's going to happen. I might not know what's going to happen to a specific character, but I know that everything's terrible. I know the stuff that's going to happen. Like if the story starts at the beginning of the war, I kind of know how it's going to end. So sure, it may or may not be a case of a character surviving, a character may or may not go to prison, but in general I know what kind of horrors they're going to come across. And I wonder if that's why I read these books very slowly, because there isn't that, oh my god, I have no idea what's going to happen kind of element. Maybe it's just that it's really serious subject matter and I needed time to digest it. But I'm inclined to think it's the former, because other books on equally horrific periods of time don't seem to have the same effect, I guess. Maybe. Perhaps this is something I should take notes on so I can find if there's a trend without just assuming that there is one. For the, I don't know, 2 people who haven't read this book, it is narrated by Death and is about a girl who steals books. That's more or less it. She is stealing books whilst living in Nazi Germany. Stuff happens that, you know, kind of fits in with being during that period of history and in that part of the world. Not really much to say, other than it's actually beautifully written. I do recommend it, but for me, very, very slow read. I had many people when I was reading this, and they were kind of seeing me carrying it around, comment that it was really beautiful and that it was a very peaceful read, and I think those are both very accurate ways of describing this. So yeah, recommend, but for me personally it wasn't like a oh my god I must keep reading kind of book. Next we have Towards Compostela, Walking the Camino de Santiago. It's very hard for me to talk about this without relating it to my experience of writing a book about my experience of walking the Camino de Santiago. But anyway, this is a memoir by a New Zealand woman who walked the Camino in the 1990s. Because her experience was quite some time ago, I can kind of attest, because of my more recent walks, to the fact that this is somewhat out of date as sort of a reference to what the Camino is like. There are places that she describes as being quite kind of dilapidated, which in the time I walked it were very fancy. So I think there are a lot of things which have been renovated between her Camino and mine. I personally felt that she was very light on description, but if you've seen any of my previous videos you'll know that I'm quite heavy-handed with that, so who knows, maybe she actually got it right and I'm just like ridiculously like loading it on with a shovel when it comes to my description. But as someone who has also walked the Camino, I could only recognise some of the places she was talking about by their place name, not the descriptions of them. And I'm not sure that that's because the places have changed since. I think it might have just been because the description of them was so light. What she does provide a lot of is information. She provides a historical context for a lot of things. She tells stories about certain saints, and yeah, just provides a lot of additional kind of informative details, which I certainly don't have in my book, and I found them really interesting to read about in hers because I legitimately didn't know some of this stuff. So I actually found this an informative read, but again, that was just filling in blanks of stuff that I knew something about but maybe not quite as much. I think this is possibly a book which is going to be of specific interest to people who want to walk the Camino or who have walked the Camino and are looking for nostalgia. I think for people who have yet to walk it, this isn't like a super great resource because it is really out of date, but kind of no judgment for that because you can't be up to date for forever. And it's not written like as a travel guide, I mean it's a memoir. But it's kind of perhaps something that people should keep in mind. Like, this is not a reflection of the Camino of today. And as someone who has walked the Camino and was reading this partly looking for nostalgia, I found it a little bit lacking for that, but I think again that might have been possibly because of the time difference between the two experiences, her walk in the 90s and mine in 2015 and 16. So it's quite hard to kind of, I guess, judge its helpfulness as a text from either perspective, I guess. I always struggle to talk about memoir because my inclination is to discuss a story as if it is a work of fiction, which of course a memoir isn't. So things like lack of character development or plot isn't really a sensible thing to talk about with a memoir, so I don't really know what to say. That was alright. Lastly, we have The Vanishing Half, which is about twin girls who were raised in a southern black community before running away in their teens and becoming separated when one of the two realises that she can pass for white and goes off to pursue the life of a much more free, privileged white woman. The story firstly follows the other sister and her eventual return to her hometown with her black daughter, and then that daughter leaving town to pursue her own life, where she bumps into the white daughter of her mother's sister. She recognises who this person is, and yeah, it's about her dealing with that and her response to it and things. I'm not going to go into spoilers, I'm just going to say just buy the book and read it, it's worth it. That's everything that I've read recently-ish. I'm currently working on The Magician's Assistant and I will at some point eventually probably let you know how that goes. Let me know down in the comments below if you've read any of these books and what you think about them, or if not these ones, let me know what you are reading. If you've enjoyed this video, maybe give it a like, and if you're new around here, do hit subscribe and ring that bell so you can stay up to date. See ya!